Oh, well, hello there, and welcome to Frank Reads. I'm Frank Hasmuller. I've been reading some of my favorite stories lately, and I thought I'd share them with you. I enjoy them, and I hope you will too. Today we are going to ancient Egyptian mythology for our story, from a book called, appropriately enough, Ancient Egyptian Myths and Legends by Lewis Spence. It was first published in 1915. And even though it's not quite the definitive work that it was once considered, it's still an important mile marker in the history of Egyptology. And the story we're reading today is about two of the most popular deities from Egyptian mythology. They were venerated throughout Egypt for well over 3,000 years. They are Osiris and Isis. So let's dive in. The myth of Osiris. Nut, the sky goddess, was the wife of Ra. She was, however, beloved by Geb, whose affection she returned. When Ra discovered his wife's infidelity, he was wrathful indeed, and pronounced a curse upon her, saying that her child should not be born in any month or in any year. Now the curse of Ra the Mighty could not be turned aside, for Ra was the chief of all the gods. In her distress, Nut called upon the god Thoth, who also loved her. Thoth knew that the curse of Ra must be fulfilled, yet by a very cunning stratagem, he found a way out of the difficulty. He went to Selene, the moon goddess, whose light rivaled that of the sun himself, and challenged her to a game of tables. The stakes on both sides were high, but Selene staked some of her light, the 17th part of each of her illuminations, and lost. Thus it came about that her light wanes and dwindles at certain periods, so that she is no longer the rival of the sun. From the light which he had won from the moon goddess, Thoth made 5 days, which he added to the year, at that time consisting of 360 days, in such wise that they belonged neither to the preceding nor to the following year, nor to any month. On these 5 days Nut was delivered of her 5 children. Osiris was born on the 1st day, Horus on the 2nd, Set on the 3rd, Isis on the 4th, and Nephthys on the 5th. On the birth of Osiris, a loud voice was heard throughout all the world saying, "The Lord of all the earth is born." A slightly different tradition relates that a certain man named Pameles, carrying water from the temple of Ra at Thebes, heard a voice commanding him to proclaim the birth of the good and great king, Osiris, which he straightway did. For this reason, the education of the young Osiris was entrusted to Pameles. Thus, it is said, was the festival of the Pamelia instituted. In course of time, the prophecies concerning Osiris were fulfilled, and he became a great and wise king. The land of Egypt flourished under his rule, as it had never done heretofore. Like many another hero god, he set himself the task of civilizing his people, who at his coming were in a very barbarous condition, indulging in cannibalistic and other savage practices. He gave them a code of laws, taught them the arts of husbandry, and showed them the proper rites wherewith to worship the gods. And when he had succeeded in establishing law and order in Egypt, he betook himself to distant lands to continue there his work of civilization. So gentle and good was he, and so pleasant were his methods of instilling knowledge into the minds of the barbarians, that they worshipped the very ground whereupon he trod. Part 2. Set, the enemy. He had one bitter enemy, however, in his brother Set. During the absence of Osiris, his wife Isis ruled the country so well that the schemes of the wicked Set to take a share in its government were not allowed to mature. But on the king's return, Set fixed on a plan whereby to rid himself altogether of the king, his brother. For the accomplishment of his ends, he leagued himself with Aso, the queen of Ethiopia, and 72 other conspirators. Then, after secretly measuring the king's body, he caused to be made a marvelous chest, richly fashioned and adorned, which would contain exactly the body of Osiris. This done, he invited his fellow plotters and the brother, the king, to a great feast. Now Osiris had frequently been warned by the queen to beware of Set, but, having no evil in himself, the king feared it not in others, so he betook himself to the banquet. When the feast was over, Set had the beautiful chest brought into the banqueting hall, and said, as though in jest, that it should belong to him whom it would fit. One after another the guests lay down in the chest, but it fitted none of them till the turn of Osiris came. Quite unsuspicious of treachery, the king laid himself down in the great receptacle. In a moment the conspirators had nailed down the lid, pouring boiling lead over it, lest there should be any aperture. Then they set the coffin adrift on the Nile, at its Taniatic mouth. These things befell, some say, in the 28th year of Osiris's life. Others say in the 28th year of his reign. When the news reached the ears of Isis, she was sore stricken, and cut off a lock of her hair, and put on mourning apparel. Knowing well that the dead cannot rest till their bodies have been buried with funeral rites, she set out to find the corpse of her husband. For a long time her search went unrewarded, though she asked every man and woman she met whether they had seen the richly decorated chest. At length it occurred to her to inquire of some children who played by the Nile, and, as it chanced, they were able to tell her that the chest had been brought to the Taniatic mouth of the Nile by Set and his accomplices. From that time, children were regarded by the Egyptians as having some special faculty of divination. Part 3. The Tamarsk Tree. By and by, the queen gained information of a more exact kind through the agency of demons, by whom she was informed that the chest had been cast up on the shores of Babylos and flung by the waves into a tamarisk bush, which had shot up miraculously into a magnificent tree, enclosing the coffin of Osiris in its trunk. The king of that country, Melkarthus by name, was astonished at the height and beauty of the tree, and had it cut down, and a pillar made from its trunk wherewith to support the roof of his palace. Within the pillar, therefore, was hidden the chest containing the body of Osiris. Isis hastened with all speed to Babylos, where she seated herself by the side of a fountain. To none of those who approached her would she vouchsafe a word, saving only to the queen's maidens, and these she addressed very graciously, braiding their hair and perfuming them with her breath, more fragrant than the odor of flowers. When the maidens returned to the palace, the queen inquired how it came that their hair and clothes were so delightfully perfumed, whereupon they related their encounter with the beautiful stranger. Queen Athenace bade that she be conducted to the palace, welcomed her graciously, and appointed her nurse to one of the young princes. Part 4. The Grief of Isis. Isis fed the boy by giving him her finger to suck. Every night, when all had retired to rest, she would pile great logs on the fire and thrust the child among them, and, changing herself into a swallow, would twitter mournful lamentations for her dead husband. Rumors of these strange practices were brought by the queen's maidens to the ears of their mistress, who determined to see for herself whether or not there was any truth in them. So she concealed herself in the great hall, and when night came, sure enough, Isis barred the doors and piled logs on the fire, thrusting the child among the glowing wood. The queen rushed forward with a loud cry and rescued her boy from the flames. The goddess reproved her sternly, declaring that by her action she had deprived the young prince of immortality. Then Isis revealed her identity to the awe-stricken Athenes and told her story, begging that the pillar which supported the roof might be given to her. When her request had been granted, she cut open the tree, took out the coffin containing the body of Osiris, and mourned so loudly over it that one of the young princes died of terror. Then she took the chest by sea to Egypt, being accompanied on the journey by the elder son of King Melkarthus. The child's ultimate fate is variously recounted by several conflicting traditions. The tree which had held the body of the god was long preserved and worshipped at Babylos. Arrived in Egypt, Isis opened the chest and wept long and sorely over the remains of her royal husband. But now she bethought herself of her son Horus the child, whom she had left in Buto, and leaving the chest in a secret place, she set off to search for him. Meanwhile Set, while hunting by the light of the moon, discovered the richly adorned coffin, and in his rage rent the body into 14 pieces, which he scattered here and there throughout the country. Upon learning of this fresh outrage on the body of the god, Isis took a boat of papyrus reeds and journeyed forth once more in search of her husband's remains. After this, crocodiles would not touch a papyrus boat, probably because they thought it contained the goddess, still pursuing her weary search. Whenever Isis found a portion of the corpse, she buried it and built a shrine to mark the spot. It is for this reason that there are so many tombs of Osiris in Egypt. Part 5. The Vengeance of Horus. By this time Horus had reached manhood, and Osiris, returning from the Duat, where he reigned as king of the dead, encouraged him to avenge the wrongs of his parents. Horus thereupon did battle with Set, the victory falling now to one, now to the other. At one time Set was taken captive by his enemy and given into the custody of Isis, but the latter, to her son's amazement and indignation, set him at liberty. So angry was Horus that he tore the crown from his mother's head. Thoth, however, gave her a helmet in the shape of a cow's head. Another version states that Horus cut off his mother's head, which Thoth, the maker of magic, stuck on again in the form of a cow's. Horus and Set, it is said, still do battle with one another, yet victory has fallen to neither. When Horus shall have vanquished his enemy, Osiris will return to earth and reign once more as king in Egypt. Well, there you go. There's the story of Osiris and Isis. I think it's very interesting. It has a lot of depths. It has the fraternal conflict that you find throughout mythologies around the world. It has a son avenging his slain father. even though the father continues to live even after death. And that whole dead father telling his son to avenge his death against the son's uncle and the father's brother. You see that in Hamlet. You see that in The Lion King. But probably my favorite part of the story is the character of Isis. She's so devoted to her husband that she goes on all of these excursions and all of these quests to find his body, to treat him right. And she mourns him and she helps him out. And it's a reflection of how ancient Egypt really valued its women. Like, ancient Egyptian women had more rights and they were treated better than any other ancient civilization. And unfortunately, ancient Egyptian women were treated better than some women are in some countries to this very day. But it just shows how fascinating Egyptian mythology is. So I hope you enjoyed that story. I know I did. And I hope you will join me next time. And until then, keep reading.